welcome. This is Alice Pistono, and I am the Director of Brand and PR here at JoVE. And as always, it's my pleasure to welcome you to another session. This time, we're going to be talking about a topic that many of you might not be familiar with, but I can already see so many of you joining. So before we dive into it, I'd like to just go through a few housekeeping items. I can already see people saying hi from all over the world. This is one of the warmest crowds, so I'm always very happy to be hosting the webinar during the session. Please tell us where you're from. Say hi, greet those who are joining the conversation. This webinar is supposed to be a two-way conversation, right? It's not a monologue, so it's an opportunity for you all to also join, get to know colleagues, maybe see some familiar faces as well. And of course, there will be an opportunity to ask questions and get to interact a little bit more towards the end. However, what I always hear is, we didn't get to go through all of the questions. Alice, I still have so much more that I want to hear about. Please tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. I have at the very beginning of the chat, so you're going to have to scroll because you're being super, super active, sending a lot of messages. I have shared a link. That link, which I will share a couple of times during the webinar, is a form that you can fill to request a contact. Okay, so in case you want us to get in touch with you and you want to dive deeper into these topics, you have some questions that we didn't manage to answer. Maybe you want to get a little bit more in depth with some of the concepts. You want to receive recommendations and suggestions of video content that you can use during your lessons. You want to understand a bit more. Here's your chance to do that. Okay. Those consultations are completely free of charge. So people who will be in touch with you, first of all, speak your regional language. So if that's not English, you will have a regional person speaking your language talking to you. And second of all, these are all PhD educated people who will be able to provide you with guidance and advice on how to make your lessons, your lectures more engaging and maybe more aligned with some of the pedagogical topics that we look at together. Again, I'm going to share that later on. I'm sharing it once more in the chat just so everybody has it. But yes, this was one of the housekeeping items I wanted to go through at the very beginning. Second thing I want to mention is alongside the chat, there is a Q&A box. Please use it. Towards the end of the session, we will get to answer some of your questions. Again, not all of them, unfortunately, because I try to be conscious of time, but there's an opportunity to ask any burning questions throughout the session. We'll just get to those towards the end. And final item, for those of you whose language is not, whose first language is not English, I will try to speak slowly, I promise. I always have this problem and I always receive this feedback that I should try and pace myself. So I'll try to do that. But there's also an opportunity to add automated subtitles that are automatically generated as I speak. So if you scroll through the options that are there, you'll see, and you'll have an opportunity to select the language that you wish to see the subtitles in. There's over 20 languages, so hopefully this will increase the accessibility of the content today. Okay, we've done the most important initial things. Now we can go into our presentation. And for me, this is one of many sessions that we host throughout the year, so I feel like I repeat myself sometimes, but I know some of you will be new to these sessions, some of you will not. What I like to begin is always a little poll, because I want to hear from you. I want to get a sense of your understanding of the topic and also maybe your expectations. So I'm going to launch a quick question for you to warm up and let me know what you think about this topic, UDL. Question's very straightforward. Are you familiar with Universal Design for Learning, UDL? Yes, no, or maybe a little bit, but I've never put it into practice. Let's see. I'm going to give you a few seconds so you can answer. Take some time to do that. I can see people are connecting more and more in the meantime, so this also allows them to get their setup done. Okay, wonderful. I feel like most of you have had a chance to answer, so I'm going to end the poll and show you the results. And as you can see, I would say majority of you have not heard of UDL before, maybe are not very familiar with it. Some of you are, but they've never been able to put it into practice. And a few of you, about 20% of the people, are familiar with it and maybe have used it in the past. So, great. I would say the majority are not really familiar with it. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the basics and then we're going to go into practical examples. I do promise that even those who are familiar with UDL will leave with something new, with some, takeaway strategies that they can apply straight away, or maybe just some more insights and some history, some of the science that backs it up. Okay, I do promise it will be interesting for everyone. However, what I do want to start with is a definition. And this is because I absolutely hate it when you go to a presentation or a conference. I was just at a conference, during the past couple of days, and oftentimes you attend a presentation and the speaker defines the concept at the very beginning, or maybe they don't even do that. And if you miss that initial 2 or 3 minute explanation, then it's very hard to keep up with the topic because you don't know exactly what they're talking about. So I promise not to do that here. I will do my absolute best to go back to this definition so everybody is always on board and they're able to understand what we mean. But let's begin with that. Universal Design for Learning, UDL. It's an acronym and it just stands for what I would call an accessible and flexible framework. It's a way of designing our lessons and our lectures. And it's a framework that we can apply that can guide us to design experiences that work for everybody, a wide range of students, not just a selected group, but a larger group. The idea is that we want to make sure that learning as an experience, because again, learning is a process, it takes a while, it's not, a one size fits all, is making as many people within the room as able as they can be to grasp the concepts and digest them and use them one day. So it's about opening pathways. And in a way, many people have asked me, but I already do that. And I already, try to adjust. And when students come to class and I realize, they're not doing really well, or maybe they don't understand the concepts, or maybe I have a lot of visual learners in the class, I then adjust. And that is absolutely great. But UDL is a little bit more intentional. UDL is the question that you ask yourself first about how do I make this as accessible as it can be to everyone? And by everyone, I don't just mean people with, diverse needs or learning capabilities. I also mean, people who just have a different background, or maybe who come from prior knowledge that is not necessarily the same. So it's an intentional process to try and make the learning environment as open and as accessible as it can be to as many students as possible. And what I like to compare it to is a city, an accessible city. Now, this actually came to me as an example because I recently traveled to Mexico for the first time. And one thing that really struck me was that in public transportation, there is a separate section for women. It's a pink section. Obviously, women with children as well, up to a certain age. And obviously, that tries to tackle a larger problem related to safety. But when I actually went into the bus or the metro, I found it such a simple way of addressing a big problem, which, might or might not be effective. But let's think about how it was designed, right? We're talking about the design here. And the concept of that was that it would not have a negative impact on anyone. So it would be a universal design for a solution, right? It wouldn't have as a purpose just trying to fix the problem in itself, but it would create for harmony within the environment. And just after, I went to watch Zootropolis 2, which is a movie that I've always really liked, the first one. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but the city that gets represented within this utopian world of animals is an accessible city. Those who need to swim can swim throughout the city, and those who need to fly can fly throughout the city. And there's no skyscrapers made of glass that would prevent birds from being able to actually fly around. The city itself is utopian in that sense because it's meant for everyone to live within. So it's a city with ramps, with lifts, with wide pavements, with signs, with multiple options for transportation. And basically, it's an environment where everybody can live. So when we think of UDL applied to the learning environment, I would love for all of us to think of this example of the city. Because one thing I do hear a lot is maybe that when we think of creating something that's universal, we kind of need to lower our expectations. We need to make it simpler. We need to, yeah, to make it accessible, we need to make it simpler fundamentally. But that's not true. Making it universal does not mean we need to lower our expectations. We just need to ensure that we are removing some of the obstacles that prevent people from meeting them. Okay. This is really important to me because it's one of the major arguments in favor of UDL. It's creating something for everyone. It's not creating something that is simpler. And we're going to get to how you can do that. Don't worry. We're just, going through the basics here. And so, why? Why should we apply it? Well, the first thing that I can say is just the reality of it. Let's describe what is out there. Let's just acknowledge it. And what we can acknowledge in any classroom is that students vary widely in a variety of features. First of all, in their prior knowledge, they will come from different backgrounds, different schools, different levels of appreciation and understanding for the subject that you're teaching. And so the fact that there is variation in this creates diversity. Then, of course, language proficiency. Some people will have a first language that's not English. That could create a barrier for some of them. And then some other things related to how they perceive information, how they process information. We're talking about, the fact that some people will be more visual learners or auditory learners. This is actually an exercise I do a lot when I go to different schools or different groups of adult learners, especially, and I ask them, what do you think your learning style is? And then we proceed to do an exercise, and maybe one day we'll do a webinar on this, but we proceed to do an exercise. And in the exercise, they actually, most of the times, end up showing behaviors that are different than the ones they would have expected. A lot of people who say, I'm a visual learner, never actually look for visual cues in the learning process. So people are not always capable of self-assessing. And us as teachers, as educators, as professors, we might not be able to know, in a class of 250 students, the variety of ways in which people learn. So this is just a fact. We can't know everybody's needs. And if we want to create something that goes towards everybody, we have to be intentional in the process. And of course, more personal issues might be related to personal motivation or maybe anxiety, a different life context, or again, what usually is perceived as the core concept of UDL. People might have different needs for accessibility, and we'll get to some examples that are a little bit more into that end. But trust me, UDL is not just for those who have learning needs; it's for everyone, and that's the real beauty of it. And also because there is an intrinsic problem with the traditional lecture model. Now, by that, don't get me wrong, I don't mean to say that traditional lectures themselves are a problem. They're absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with having some traditional lectures. Some of them will be needed. Most of them will be very effective. And, a little bit of a challenge is also useful sometimes. But it is true that research generally shows that just having traditional lectures all the time is not the best solution for learning in general. First of all, because attention decreases after a while. I know we have long blocks sometimes of maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, but we need to be able to package the information so that our brains don't go into cognitive overload. And this is from a really good paper written by Bradbury, which I often cite because it's a wonderful piece of research. And by the way, you'll have the bibliography at the end. But if I was to sit here for the following, 40 minutes, just talking to you one way without interacting with you, without stimulating any sort of feedback, your attention would definitely decrease at some point. That's just a fact. And also, if we compare the passive lecture model with any sort of multimodal learning process, so when we actually ask people to switch it up a little, answer a question, have a pop quiz, put a video out there to, stimulate different areas of our brain. The passive lecture model performs a lot worse than any other form of multimodal learning. And finally, we have limitations to our working memory. Our working memory is the one that, processes immediate information. So imagine if I wanted to explain to you how to bake a cake, for example. I'd sit here and I could just tell you how to bake a cake, but that would be a little bit dense. It would be a little traditional in that sense. And the instruction, I bet, would not be super efficient. What I could do instead is I could explain, but I could also show you and do it in front of you. Or I could show you a video of how to do that. Or I could do a variety of things, really. I could interact with you, ask you questions. Any sort of multimodal learning would make our working memory reach that limitation a lot later. So traditional lectures themselves, they're not a problem, but again, they might present some issues, and UDL is there to prevent those issues from the very beginning. But where does it come from? This theory, this idea? Well, it's actually grounded in neuroscience, in cognitive neuroscience. And this is taken from the proceedings of CAST, very important conference that happens every year in the US. And at CAST in 2018, UDL was defined by identifying three key networks within our brain that are essential for learning. So imagine anytime you want to learn something, there's a few networks that get activated. And these are the so-called affective networks. Those are the ones that get ignited first. Say you want to bake a cake, those are the networks related to your motivation, your interest, your desire to learn how to bake a cake, which could be a variety of reasons. It could be because you want to eat a cake, or it could be because you've always wanted to become proficient at that. All sorts of areas get activated because of this affective process. So that's the first step. Then we have recognition networks. And those are the ones related to perception and comprehension of information. So you want to bake a cake, you're motivated to do that. Here comes the ability to comprehend and to understand the information on how to bake your cake. So recognition is you receiving the information. And finally, we have strategic networks. Those are the ones that will lead to the output. So planning, action, problem solving. Once you've received the information, the strategic networks process the information and then allow you to take action and to create the output we were mentioning. So what does UDL do with all of these? First of all, affective. So we said the way I decide that I want to be motivated, achieve, and pursue. How does universal design for learning tackle that? We want to engage with people in multiple ways. We want to stimulate them in multiple ways. Basics of student engagement, right? Some students will be motivated by grades. Some students will be motivated by the desire to learn. Wonderful. Other students will be motivated by the fact that they feel peer pressure, or other students will be motivated because they can already see that this course will benefit them one way or another. Different ways to engage with people activate different affective networks. And UDL, designing it universally, ensures that we're doing it in a way that's comprehensive. UDL for recognition networks means we design learning in a way that allows people to receive the information in a variety of different ways. And simply said, that could be not just talking, but visualizing, or using your hands, or discussing with someone in a synesthetic way. So it's presenting the information in a way that is not one, but is multimodal. Okay, those are the recognition networks that get activated. And finally, when we design universally for the strategic networks, we allow people to think of many ways in which they can express themselves. They can express the learning process. What does that mean? Multiple types of assignment, for example. I have very vivid and very fond memory of a module that I took at university in philosophy of science. And one of the many reasons I loved that module was that when we started, the professor told us at the end of this module, there's going to be an assignment where you will need to propose an argument from a philosopher and a counter argument from another philosopher. And she didn't tell us how. She said you can have the output that you want the way you want it. And obviously, it was a very creative class, but different people did completely different things. Somebody wrote a poem where those two views were being opposed. We had a rap battle. You know, we had a video with a rap battle between the two philosophers. Somebody simply wrote an essay, a beautiful essay. But the fact that there can be multiple ways to express and process what you've learned can be extremely stimulating to people with different processes, needs, desires. You know, UDL is truly for everyone. So let's go through these three principles in practice. What can we do to make them happen? So, for the multiple means of engagement, so how do we decide to engage with the information? How do we make it happen in that sense? A variety of options. We can, for example, have some polls or scenario questions or some short quizzes. Those are all great ways to increase the engagement at first to make sure that people come in a little bit more um, intrigued. For example, we could begin any lecture with a pop quiz, one question QR code that shows up on screen and kind of like assesses the situation. This could immediately put people into a mindset where they say, well, I do know the answer to that. This might be, something that I'm good at. Or maybe, oh goodness, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, so I should probably pay attention, right? So stimulating that engagement. But also offering choice and assignment formats can be stimulating. The fact that this professor told us at the very beginning made us really excited and we wanted to be engaged with the lesson material. And of course, real world relevance. If we make things relevant to the audience, it's going to be easier. Now, this is a little bit of a meta session, a little bit of an experiment, because what I try to do with you is exactly all of the above. I put a poll at the very beginning to hopefully stimulate your engagement, and I'm trying to make it relevant to you. I'm talking about my trips, my experiences, the movies that I watch, and the classrooms that I've taught, in the hope that some of these will resonate with you. And I understand for STEM, it's harder. Here I'm talking about pedagogy, so it's easier to insert it into a real world context. But it is possible. And I think achieving that relevance can be extremely powerful for your students to actually understand that. And then we have multiple ways of getting the information, right? Representation. So again, I spoke earlier about the fact that there are different types of learners out there. Why don't we try to go towards everybody and to cater to their preferences? So instead of just speaking, we could have diagrams. We could have videos. I'm a big, big fan of videos, you know that. But we could also have shorter text, summaries. AI can really come in handy when it comes to that. We could have a pre-teaching vocabulary. What I mentioned at the beginning, I hate it when people say one acronym and then they never go back to it. And if I've missed the definition, I'm never going to be able to understand what we're talking about. In this case, having a pre-teaching vocabulary with the keywords, with all of the main things, can help people understand and engage with the information. But also, we can just have labeled steps. So the processes and everything that we've discussed, that can be quite lengthy, it can be broken down into pieces. And that is called micro learning. We have a separate webinar on that, which if you're interested, I encourage you to watch. We can get in touch with you and share the links and everything. But yes, processing information in packages can help because a lot of people hit that cognitive overload very quickly. And so UDL, Universal Design, can help in that sense. And finally, multiple means of action and expression. So, how do we get that output out of people? And how do we intentionally design to have a variety of outputs? Again, we can have assessments that vary written, video, oral. I'm not saying you have to do it all the time. I'm not saying you have to do it for everyone, but maybe offer a chance. Or maybe just have one of each. So, if people have to be penalized by one of them, well, at least they'll be penalized at some point. Obviously, that's partly a joke, but it's also telling you if I was to ask everyone, oh, could you, have this as your assignment, and your assignment will involve a public speaking task. I wouldn't get for granted that everybody will be wonderful at public speaking because it's something that usually scares people. Okay. But think of how many times we believe that about written tests, multiple choice questions. We often give it for granted that people are just going to do well. The reality of it is, some people might be great at public speaking and be terrible at multiple choice questions for reasons that we cannot imagine. Because again, every brain is different. If you ask a class of people, close your eyes and imagine an apple in front of you, you have everything. You have people who can see the apple before their eyes in bright colors and people who see absolutely nothing. And I'm telling you, absolutely nothing. And that variety is not something we can predict. So designing for everyone is trying to cater to different needs. So offering opportunities, really. And of course, we can have progress checkpoints, rubrics, exemplars. There's so much that we can do. Again, I'm just giving a few examples here. They're very specific sometimes, but it's to make sure that you leave with something in your hands, right? Um, However, these are the principles. But I do realize that 1 hour is very short. This is a huge topic. We could talk about it for hours. And one thing that I would like you to do with me right now is to go and look at two real tools, two examples of tools that we can use that present a lot of UDL features that are UDL in a way compliant. So let's have a look at them. How do I make it happen? My first and preferred example is videos. It will not be a surprise for many of you, but I do want to have a look at why videos can cater to so many different people. Because intuitively, people would say a video is for visual learners. Yes and no. And I actually have a case study later that I can't wait to present to you because it shows that that's not always the case. So, videos. First of all, they are available immediately in multiple languages. Thanks to AI, this is becoming more and more common. Both languages and subtitles can be useful for different reasons, and that's just something that cannot happen as you speak. I am speaking to you with automated subtitles, but they won't be perfect. And also, it's my voice and not another one in another language. So, if your students for some reason need that sort of feature, videos are wonderful because they provide that because it's immediate. The videos that I have on the platform have all of those features quickly available. So, it's easy to see the usefulness of the UDL principle there. Then, something that's a little bit less common that maybe people don't think about as much, but it is absolutely fundamental, and it's the playback speed. Now, I mentioned at the beginning, I'll try and pace myself because I always get some feedback related to you should speak more slowly. You're right. That wouldn't be a problem if this was a video. And actually, when you receive the recording, you will have an opportunity to put it at the pace that you'd like. And that pace can be half the time, or it can be twice the speed because you're already familiar with what we've discussed and you just want to get, the main touch points. What's really important here is that because videos get sent to individuals, there's no shame because they can do it in their own time. Whilst I have been in the position of being in a class, not understanding a single word of what the person was saying, the lecturer, the professor was saying, because they were speaking a language that was not my first language. And what I'd do is I'd go back home, put it at half the speed, and then keep up with the material. But it would take me extra time. And so just having these videos, oftentimes before the lecture, can be extremely powerful for people who don't speak your language, people who need a little bit more time. And actually, sometimes when everyone's speaking the same language, but there's a new word that nobody has ever heard of before, just having those subtitles or just being able to replay, rewatch can be useful because no spelling mistakes, but also they acquire the jargon much more quickly. Also, the video is short, so that cognitive overload doesn't kick in quite as quickly. And finally, the most important feature here in a video, in case you're really, really designing for a class that needs special attention towards certain cases, the audio description. The audio description is meant for people to understand without watching. Again, visually impaired people on top, but it can be anyone. It can be someone who's maybe taking notes, very simply said. And imagine the audio description is the one that you also get on TV when you're watching and you can add different types of subtitles. In this case, it wouldn't just say tissues are groups of structurally similar cells, but it would describe the woman, describe what she's wearing, and describe the relevance of the sentence to the picture. The videos that have this feature, like the ones here on JoVE, they are designed with that in mind. They're designed for you, so you don't even need to think about it. A textbook simply read out loud doesn't quite do the same. And imagine the difference between hearing the molecule has three atoms, or the molecule has three atoms in a triangular shape. It's equilateral, and each of the atoms has a distance from the radius of, and this allows building a picture in your mind. That's the difference between just subtitles and an audio description. And then, second example that I promised, quizzes. Now, quizzes are a little bit less intuitive as an example, I think, because maybe not many people see them as an accessible tool in that sense, but they're definitely accessible and universal, very intentionally universal. First of all, because again, multiple languages and ability to build that vocabulary more quickly. Vocabulary scaffolds means, acquiring that jargon, those pieces of information through iteration. And so if I start seeing those in questions, it's easier for me to actually attach meaning to them rather than just hearing those words. But also, they function as a background knowledge activator, which is great because it stimulates that initial motivation, desire to be persistent, to retain the information. And they can also serve as warm-up questions, right? Walk into a class, ask a warm-up question. This can position people in a way that kind of allows to level the playing field. Because if everyone needs to answer the same question, and you as a lecturer, you understand the needs of your class, that is also advantageous for you. And that's what I did with you. At the very beginning of the session, I asked you, how familiar are you with the topic? And if 100% of you had said, I've done this multiple times, I probably would have skipped the first couple of slides and I would have gone with a deep dive into some of the theories and more applications. But this needs to happen in a way that takes feedback from the crowd as well. So asking questions, great way to design intentionally because it puts you in a position where you are already listening, actively listening to something even before it happens. Again, we're not adjusting after seeing the issue. We're trying to be intentional in our design. That's the concept. And to explain that, I actually have my potentially favorite case study, also one of my favorite parts of the job that I do, which is a particular situation that happened a few years back that I love to present because I think it encompasses a lot of the concepts that we've covered today. This is a case of a visually impaired student. So I know it's a very specific case. I know it's, not going to happen to all of you, but it gives you an idea of how important it is to do universal design for everyone. So this professor comes to us and he says, I have an issue that I don't know how to tackle. I have a student who's visually impaired. He enrolled in an undergraduate chemistry degree. This is the University of Milan. And as you can imagine, that poses a few challenges. Chemistry is heavily dependent on visualization, diagrams, molecules, 3D spaces, and so on. Molecular animations, you need to be able to see what a molecule looks like, absolutely. And practical labs, lab demonstrations. So, how does a visually impaired student tackle all of that? Our recommendation, and I hope none of you will laugh, was, well, why don't we give the students some videos? And I know it sounds really odd, but videos in that case were exactly what the student needed. Now, saying you need to watch videos as a visually impaired person, again, counterintuitive. But the videos have audio description. So the audio description allows you to visualize in your mind what is happening. And this is not uncommon if you think of piano players, if you think of, ballerinas who rehearse. what they do is they create a visual picture in their mind of what is happening. And the audio description allows you to do that. And through that, we then proceeded to provide animations because the animations, those short videos, were very to the point. They broke down the complex concepts. And so it was discrete steps, narrated visual, spatial descriptions. Again, what does the molecule look like? Cause and effect sequences. The fact that we broke it down into smaller chunks made it all the more digestible. And the student could also go at their own pace. They could pause, they could go at 0 times the speed, they could do whatever they wanted with the videos. They had a lot of freedom. And finally, the lab tutorials. The lab tutorials are meant for you to then go and perform hands on. So, this is for everyone. Again, the piano player who rehearses in their mind, the ballerina who rehearses in their mind, right? This is about building a mental model of the sequence that you're going to have to perform. So you can rehearse the procedure from a cognitive perspective, and then you can arrive and be more confident, more prepared. And what happened with that student, I love this case study because it's real. I didn't make it up. It's not like an example that I come up with to explain a concept theoretically. The student graduated top of their class. And yes, exceptional person, I agree with you. But I do feel like a lot of that was being intentional in designing content for this person, in creating a lecture that would be universal. Because bear in mind, when the professor came to us, they said, I want to design something that's fair for everyone. They didn't say, I want to design specific content for the student. They said, I want it to be for everyone. I want it to be universal. And that's what we tried to do. The videos, we didn't make them available to the one student. We made them available to everyone. And that allowed everyone to achieve better understanding of concepts, stronger lab performance. And this particular student was also very good at tactile sensitivity. So that was in a way an advantage. And it actually allowed the student to then go and teach other students how to do the same things in lab. The student could actually, during the titration, the student could actually predict when the last drop would make the color go neutral. And that stimulated a general sense of inclusion because everyone was feeling much more involved, and a lot of the content that was provided, extra content, many students wanted to use because they saw the benefit of something that was not for one person. Again, it was for everyone. It was to level the playing field. But now I want to hear from you because I have spoken for half an hour. Your cognitive overload is definitely kicking in. So I am going to give you another chance to let me know what you think about, in this case, your concerns. So the question is, what's your main concern when approaching UDL, Universal Design for Learning? And the options are students won't use the material I have provided. It's about academic rigor being lowered, or I don't know where to start. I just have no time for this. Let's see. Going to give you a couple of minutes. Okay, wonderful. I feel like many of you have had a chance to answer. So I'm going to show you the results, which are not changing much. So let's end it and launch. Here we go. So many of you are saying the students won't actually use the material I'm providing. I will have done a bunch of work for nothing. Some of you are saying it might lower my academic standards. And the majority of you, 54%, actually said, I don't know where to start. I don't have enough time for this, which is fair. And what I want to do in this case, I want to try and propose some solutions to these problems. Again, I'm not trying to convince you to do otherwise, but here are some options, things we can consider. So first of all, my students won't use the optional materials. I actually ran a session earlier where the same session, UDL, where one attendee asked me, should I communicate to my students that I'm doing this? So my advice is twofold in this case. First of all, I would recommend integrating the material within something that is relevant to your students. So not just adding videos on a platform and saying, hey, watch it, but maybe it will be part of a preparation task, saying this is required for you to then be able to perform the tutorial or to come to class and understand the concepts. So here's a video that helps you understand this because it's part of a preparation task. Or maybe some people are motivated by assignments. So you say, here's a quiz, it will be 5% of your final mark, and here's what you need to do to tackle it. But I have another piece of recommendation for you, which is I think it's very important to inform students about what we're doing, especially Gen Z students. They do appreciate the fact that we communicate what we do for them, not in a patronizing way, not saying, oh, I'm doing so much for you, right? But more like, I have thought about this. And I believe that, many of you might be experiencing difficulties for reasons that could escape me because I cannot be in everybody's brains. So I've actually decided to add some material. This is designed for you to maximize your chances of success. Try and use it. Let me know. Give me feedback. And what happens usually is that when you're more intentional in communicating what you've done, in trying to be open, trying to show your emotional intelligence towards the class is usually very perceptive about it. So I'm not saying it will work immediately. I'm not saying all the students will be super responsible about it. But I also think that it doesn't have to be that way necessarily. UDL is not about giving something that all students will use, certainly. It's about making a difference in somebody's life. And I know, the argument of, oh, one view can change somebody's, learning process might seem a little faint, but it's also true. For that chemistry student in particular, the fact that we tried to achieve something for this person had a positive effect on many. But truly, if it only had been one person who ends up graduating top marks because we did something for them, I think it's worth it. So up to you to decide, but this is my suggestion, twofold suggestion for you. Then I'm glad not too many people mentioned the academic rigor being lowered because I try to kind of debunk that. But if you're not convinced, my examples maybe were not enough to convince you, that's absolutely fair. My recommendation is to maintain assessment criteria that are very strict, very clear. It's important that they're clear, but very strict. So the fact that we have multiple ways to submit an assignment, for example, does not mean we're going to be nice about marking it. We can still keep very strict criteria even when we open up. So if you're scared this is going to happen, this is one potential solution. And finally, what most of you said, I have no time. I don't know where to start. And that's why I tried to give you two practical examples because there could be discussions that go on for hours and hours and hours, but videos, quizzes, especially the videos with their captions, with the audio description, they already do more than enough in most cases. They already cater to a vast crowd just by adding them. So you have a traditional lecture that goes smoothly, and then maybe one video that summarizes a concept. Or you have one video before class that gives the students the gist of the concept, and then they come to class and they can dive deeper. That's my recommendation for you. If you're a little bit lost, I would say don't start too big. Don't ask yourself too many questions. It might be a little bit overwhelming, but do try to add one thing, one piece of content that's mostly already prepped for you, so you don't have to, stress too much and you can already start seeing maybe some results, maybe some better uptake. Again, I will share with you the contact form because if you want to receive some suggestions of potential videos, potential quizzes, potential things that you would like to add to your lectures, you don't necessarily need to look for those by yourself. There are people at JoVE who can do that for you. And again, I do want to stress it out, it's free. These people will suggest content to you, and it's a service that you don't need to pay for. These are all PhD level people, but very well educated, pedagogy trained, so they know what to suggest and when. It's just a service. My recommendation is usually make the most of it. And those are some of the features that you will find. As I mentioned, they're very, very concise videos. They're live action demonstrations, so easy to understand, to grasp. The captions are there, so you don't need to strive too much if, again, languages are an issue. And the audio description is there for all of those videos that can be useful for your needs. Plus, some videos actually have real scientists in them, and that increases the chances of your students seeing themselves in a position of replicating. I mentioned the lab tutorial earlier. The fact that you see somebody actually perform the experiment can create more authenticity to it. And so it really does allow for a better sort of planning in that sense. And then going at your own pace, it's so relaxing. Students can rewatch, they can create their own summaries, they can annotate, they can use AI at their own pace, they can do whatever they want with it, but at least they can do it under their own terms, right? As a pre-class viewing, they don't need to be under the spotlight all the time. And if they want to watch the video 10 times, they can watch the video 10 times until they've understood. And with that, I would love to thank you all for staying with me for this long session. But I do think we have now time for questions. And while we move on to those, I will quickly show you the bibliography in the background in case some of you want to have a further read, or maybe, maybe I've simulated you to get interested in all of this. This is your chance. So let's have a look at the many questions that you have submitted. And again, I'm sorry we never get to answer all of them, but let's see. So somebody's from the crowd is mentioning, I'm interested in requesting a playlist in a new course I am forming in the spring. However, my syllabus is not quite set. How thorough of a syllabus is required? Are general topics covered enough? Also, can we request playlists for multiple different courses? And if so, how does that work? First of all, let me pull up the syllabus that this person is referring to. So in the form that I've shared, you're going to have your first name, last name, institutional email address, and then there's an opportunity to upload your course syllabus. This syllabus does not need to be super thorough. First of all, there's a human who's going to respond to you. It's not an automated AI, whatever. So if they need a little bit more detail, they'll be in touch. Or if you want to add some details, you can always have a conversation with this person. The syllabus does not need to be super thorough. We have a variety of content that can just be positioned as general topics, and you're going to be able to edit that playlist together with the person who is there with you to answer your questions and so on. Also, yes, you can select playlists for multiple courses, however many, you just submit the form multiple times. So choose your first file and you send it, and then you choose another file and you send it. There's no limitation. So you can absolutely do that, and we'll be super, super happy to support you in the process as well. And thank you for the question, by the way. So someone else is asking, how does Joe videos for college level math courses? This is a great question. I actually have the Joe platform open here, and you will see that there is a new section related to, if we go on to education, sorry, I'm skipping through a little bit, but within the education section, we have just launched a variety of different sections. One of them is related to maps. Let me just find it. There we go, mathematics. So JoVE as the main platform, education as the section, and then we go on to mathematics, and you will see that there's quite a lot of content related to math fundamentals that has just launched. There are currently 11 chapters, and each chapter has a variety of videos within it. So if we open trigonometry, for example, you can see a variety of videos. So there is already quite a lot. There's going to be more chapters launching. It's actually one of the main focus points of 2026. So yes, there's a lot of content out there. You can have a little bit more. If you just want to have a browse, or if you're patient enough to wait, there's going to be much more that comes out. Let's see. Oh, there's so many questions. I'm always so sorry because we never get to answer all of your questions. They're usually wonderful, and this time is no different. Um, Okay, so someone else is asking, it's fine that we use videos, but how can we supplement them so they seek further information because they just watch the videos and don't want to read or look for more information? This is a great question. What I usually recommend is to pair the video with an immediate checkpoint quiz that allows you to see if they've understood. It's also great for you because you're able to monitor from the LMS. Again, if you want to get more details on this, there's a dedicated person that can go through the steps. I'm just going through the main idea. But pairing the video with a quiz allows you to track their progress, allows them to immediately see the output of what they've watched. And my recommendation is also to maybe connect the video with something that's practical. So what you see here, for example, is yes, an animated video, but then there's a few scientists in action videos. These are a little bit longer, and again, not everybody might want to watch them immediately, but linking a concept to a practical real world application can stimulate that process of people wanting to do more with it. Exercises can be helpful. There's a variety of options, but yes, I think achieving some relevance in the real world can definitely be one of them, but also just sending one quiz can be super powerful in that sense. And on the question, on the quiz note, somebody's asking, where do you get the quiz questions for the JoVE videos? Does JoVE have a question bank? Absolutely. I'm still within the JoVE platform and I'm going on to the education section. You will notice that there is a JoVE quiz function. And JoVE quiz is our extensive repository. You can create your own quizzes. You can get some from the quiz bank. There's thousands of questions in the repository. So again, there's an opportunity to receive these. You don't need to create all of this by yourself. It can be a bit long, but there's also some chapter quizzes, some textbook chapter quizzes. So say you use a very common textbook, like adolescence, chapter one, biological transitions, the questions are already there. Again, I highly recommend getting in touch through the form because it allows you to actually have a person who guides you through the process instead of my 1 minute answer. But yes, we do have an extensive quiz bank, so you can get anything that you want from that. And thank you all for the questions. There are, again, many more that I can try to answer. And unfortunately, my time is up. So I just wanted to go back to this. And actually say one last time a final thank you for everyone, to everyone for joining me today. I know there's much more to discuss. There's always much more. I wish I could stay here much longer, but then your attention would definitely drop. So, if you want to get in touch, you have the form, you have an opportunity to do so. There's also a feedback form at the end. It helps us improve, it helps us deliver a better service each time. On a personal note, this is our final webinar for 2025, and we're wrapping up this year with over 10,000 people who joined our webinars. First of all, it's quite striking to me to think that 10,000 people connected to hear me speak in general, but also I wanted to say that out loud because for me, it's a huge opportunity to thank you all for being here, maybe for the first time, maybe for the 10th time. So, thank you. Thanks again for your attention, for your warm wishes, for your comments, for your feedback. We take everything very, very seriously. We read every single piece of feedback that you send, and we try to improve and implement it each time. So, with that, I'd love to thank you all again for coming, wishing you a wonderful end of your year, and I hope to see you very soon at one of our next sessions in 2026. Bye, everyone.